What is up, YouTube land? I am your down and dirty host, Justin Phillip, aka Kid Tech. That is my Instagram handle where I share all of the behind the scenes on all kinds of different projects that I work on out here in the Super Bowl of the filmmaking community, otherwise known as Los Angeles. So I know some people commented, asked me, that's kind of a curious Instagram name, but I was actually given that nickname on a feature-length documentary that I was the B-cam operator on because those dudes realized real quick that I was just a big kid obsessed with film tech. And we just happened to have some fresh new film tech to be checking out that the homie Ron Sim sent over from SIMMOD Lens. And you guys know how much I love diffusion filters, and these are some super sexy new filters from SIMMOD called Aria Mist. So before we get into all the awesome product specs on these cool new diffusion filters, we gotta first check out and see how they affect the image. So I found a model, a bowl of fruit, some candles, and away we went. Let's roll that footage and check it out. Alright, so not bad, right? Now before we get in and I analyze the footage with you and I share my 2 cents on what I think about these specific Aria Mist filters, I do want to talk a little bit about the product first. Check out the nice little case these come in. Now the set that I have is the 77mm screw-on. So right now they come in densities of 1/8, 1/4, and 1/2. They're also available in 82mm screw-on as well as the more industry standard Panavision size 4x5.65 inch. Now if you ask me, and like I always share with all of my Dog Times Discord members, courtesy of the private Patreon group, I always talk to them over there about making smart investments. And in my opinion, the industry standard square filter size is really the long, forward-thinking, smarter investment, in my opinion. However, if you are using more vintage lenses, you do want to keep in mind that those old-ass vintage stills lenses from the 70s and earlier were never designed with matte boxes in mind. So you have to be careful about adding a lot lot of weight on the front of those old stills lenses. They're very delicate, and as you and I both know, we are rapidly running out of good copies. So just keep that in mind when using follow focus motors or clamp on matte boxes with your old modded vintage lenses. Sometimes that's where the screw-on filters really come in clutch. Now, speaking in terms of density, I was first disappointed when I first heard that they only offer up to a half. However, after I got them in the mail and started testing them out, I realized real quick, like, whoa, the half Aria Mist is actually quite strong for a half. In my experience, specifically when using lenses like the Zeiss Milvus, I tend to start at a half and sometimes work all the way up to a number 2 strength density when talking about diffusion filters with, way new, fresh, super crispy, crisp lenses. But the half Aria Mist is actually quite nice. Now, I also want to point out that these are black diffusion filters, so that is something to keep in mind. They do affect the image differently than, say, a white diffusion filter. So there's a lot of folks, specifically, again, on the Dog Times Discord chat, that are big fans of the black satin. However, in my testing, I found white satin to be the better choice. However, it's always going to vary depending on the project you're shooting on. Again, this is something I talk about with my Dog Times Patreon members all the time. You have to honor the piece that you're shooting, honor the script, honor the tone, honor the motif of that specific project. And what you'll find is once you start doing that, your projects will start having a variety to them, and you won't end up being a carbon copy, cookie cutter DP. At the end of the day, one thing I think we can both agree on is that diffusion filters are definitely a nice way of crafting your own unique look. Now, when talking specifically about these Aria Mist black filters from SIMMOD Lens, these are made with shot glass. So if you are not familiar with shot glass, that's a really high quality glass that actually is used by other companies such as Zeiss and Tiffin. Now, with the screw-on filters, both 77 and 82mm Aria Mist that SIMMOD offers, it is a brass frame with a really cool gold line trim. I like that. It looks kind of nice. But what's really nice about having a brass screw-on filter is that you don't run into issues that you do with normal crappy aluminum filters. They don't get stuck as much. They don't strip out as easily. It's just a better product. A lot of times what happened with me in my early days of messing with screw-on filters, you get some crappy cheapo aluminum frame and they get stuck onto the lens, and that's always a big pain in the ass. You don't really run into that issue when using brass filters. Now, this is something exclusive to the 77 and 82mm circular filters from SIMMOD. They have a nano coating on here which helps repel water, oil, and grease. So that is really, really nice quality. There is a special process that Ron let me know how they've created these Aria Mist filters. It's actually the same process used by Emmy Award-winning industry standard Tiffin. So this process involves laminating the filter substrate between 2 pieces of optical glass, and then grinding that flat to a tolerance of 1/10,000th of an inch. So the tilde to that is that is a process which allows the most accurate light transmission without tonal color changes. In other words, it's a very, very good thing. Now that we have all the specs out of the way, let's revisit that footage so we can talk about what we see going on here. Because the biggest thing to me that I look at when choosing diffusion filters, again, this varies from project to project, but not every project is going to call for a heavy halation around the highlights, which is a big thing that a lot of diffusion filters have, specifically black diffusion filters. Another thing that people don't usually talk about when showing their filter tests is how different filters contaminate the bokeh. So let's dive in and check all of that out now. Okay, folks, so as you can see, I am going to be comparing the Arias to a lot of other industry standard filters. But before we get to that, I do want to break down briefly and talk about the differences that I'm noticing with these filters right off the bat. So I was using a Leica R Summicron 35mm. It's a very older, it's a version 1 Summicron, okay? So it is from the early 70s. But as you can see, the Leica R is quite nice. Now, I will admit, looking at this footage, I think I was a little soft when I wasn't using a filter, meaning it was my own fault, pulling my own focus manually. So the focus may be a little off when I didn't have a filter, but we're still, generally, you're seeing the differences here, right? Right away, the difference between no filter on a Leica R with a red Komodo versus a quarter Aria Mist with the Leica R red Komodo. You can tell right off the bat, you know, the Aria Mists are really good filters for squeezing that waveform, you know, and lowering the contrast, lowering the saturation, but you're still getting all the same richness of the colors, and that's what you're seeing here. It's literally just squeezing the waveform. The quarter is actually quite nice, but if we pop down to the eighth, you know, it's very, very subtle, isn't it? The eighth is very, very subtle. This would kind of probably be, in my opinion, the go-to of the density of Aria Mist that I would use on these old vintage lenses, such as these Leica Rs. You know, it's just gonna very slightly lower your saturation, lower your contrast, and it just, you know, it takes away all the crispness that something like the Red Komodo 6K cinema camera has, right? The digital cameras are very sharp, and that's what a lot of DPs are trying to avoid nowadays, that quote-unquote video quality, right? And that's where something like diffusion filters really come in handy to help that out. So that is why I lean on filters so much, you know, since the beginning. I like the idea of creating a unique look for each individual project, but also I kind of like putting a stamp on it and be like, well, they're not gonna be able to rewind what we captured on the day. You know, you can only do so much in post. And I know a lot of people, they love to, AKA quote unquote, let's light it in post. And sometimes I understand that happens. But at the end of the day, you know, I like to kind of put a seal on it to some extent, and that's where diffusion filters really help out. Now, here I'm jumping back and forth while I've been talking between the 1/8 Aria Mist and the 1/4, but when we jump to the half, holy cannoli, like this is what I was saying, what was really blown away, and you're really going to see when I show you some of the other more quote-unquote industry standard filters out there made by Tiffin, made by Schneider, where the half Aria Mist is a very strong half, in my opinion, compared to other densities of other diffusion filters. I've never seen a half this strong. Generally, what happens with diffusion filters is that it doubles, each density doubles. Sometimes, that's not always the case. That's not always true. So don't adhere to that. But generally, they usually double the strength from each density. But it just seems to be such a huge jump from the 1/4 to the half, where I would say that seems a little bit more than double. Whereas if you look at the 1/8 to the 1/4, you'd say, okay, you know, maybe that's double, but the half just seems so extreme compared to the other densities. For instance, this half Aria Mist reminds me of a project, actually this same actress that we did a while ago. Maybe you saw it. It was Tinder, but in the 80s. It was a little piece that my wife directed and wrote, and I shot it. And I was using the Milvus. However, we were wanting to make it look like the 80s. So I did a couple things. You know, we kind of did it in the standard definition aspect ratio. But also I threw on a soft net filter, but the soft net filter was a level 3. Okay, it was like the most highest density filter that you could get in those soft nets. But when looking at the half Aria Mist, it immediately reminded me of that soft net number 3. So it's just so crazy. It has that level of, heavy, kind of like a veil over the lens, which is what soft net filters are, because the soft net filters are based upon the olden days when guys would literally take nylons and stretch it across the back of the lens before they mounted it on the camera. Okay. So now let's jump to the way that the Aria Mist affects the Milvus. And here we see, now we're getting somewhere, right? Now I really like, you know, combining these diffusion filters with, you know, more modern, crispy, sharp lenses like the Milvuses. Now, if you don't know, the Milvuses actually are the same. This is only for the super speeds, by the way. So the 25, 35, 50, and 85, 1.4s, and the 18-28, they are the same exact glass that is in the CP3s, okay? And Zeiss has admitted to that. So, you know, a lot of guys call the Zeiss Milvus they're the mini Supreme Primes, okay? Because the Otises are known as the mini Ultra Primes or Master Primes, whereas the Milvuses are known as the mini Supreme Primes. And it's just something interesting, like or AKA poor man's Supreme Primes. But you can see this is why I kind of was leaning on the Milvuses for so long, shooting a lot of projects with them, because I realized like, oh, I can use way heavier diffusion filters and different kinds of effect filters with these Milvuses lenses, and we're still retaining a lot of the sharpness and everything. And this is a great example. I mean, look at this. No filter with the Zeiss Milvus on the Komodo versus a half Aria Mist on the Zeiss Milvus Komodo. I actually like it. I like it. I prefer it more than when the half was on the Leica R. And then I can jump to the Leica R. I think it's this one. Yeah. I mean, just look at the biggest difference there. The biggest notice, though, that I want us to take note of is how much the Aria Mists are squeezing that waveform, right? And a lot of guys are going to be after that. You know, they're looking for a way to lower the contrast. In this aspect, the Aria Mist, especially the half Aria Mist, it really reminds me of an Ultracon, and that is the filter that Tiffin won the Emmy Award for. And we're going to look at those examples right now. So let's jump to some more comparisons. Now, with these comparisons, I don't have skin tones, but the reality is here we can see how it's going to affect the saturation of the fruit bowl and the color chip chart. And more importantly, that candle is there for a nice spectral highlight to see how different diffusion filters can halate around highlights as well as show or contaminate the bokeh. Because here you can see there's no filter on this now, okay? Now, if we jump to something like the Aria 1/8, now we're starting to see a little bit slight more halation around that candle flame, right? Jump to no filter and jump to the 1/8. And you can already see where it's squeezing that waveform, even at a 1/8, right? You're starting to lower that contrast. Now, if we go back to the normal, and then if I jump to a quarter Aria Mist, now you can really see kind of that veil starting to come in, that kind of overall glow or mist across the frame. And in that aspect, it's reminding me of like a fog filter or a smoke filter. And we're going to see it compared to a fog filter very soon. I didn't compare the Aria Mist to a smoke filter because I only have smoke in a level 2, because smoke filters are designed for indoors and they're very heavy densities. I don't even think they go as low as a quarter. I don't believe. Okay, but then if we see Aria half compared to no filter here, big difference. I mean, just look at the more halation around that candle flame and just watch the blacks, how much it's lifting those blacks. And it's lowering the saturation quite a bit, right? No filter, Aria half. Okay, so now, okay, the next is here we have a black pro mist. Okay, this is the most cliche diffusion filter on the market. Every YouTuber talks about black pro mist. Okay, because of that, I'm not really a fan of it. If you don't know by now, if you're new here to my channel, I march to the beat of my own drum. I hate doing what everyone else is doing. Okay, so I abandoned the black pro mist years ago, but I still have one in my kit, obviously. So this is the black pro mist quarter, and you see that compared to the Aria 1/4. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to no filter here. Okay, Aria 1/4 versus black pro mist 1/4. And now you're just seeing it. Notice how much more the black pro mist halates around that candle. Whoops. You know, look at the Aria quarter. Notice the candle. Now look at the candle. You see how much more blooming happens with that black pro mist? That's one of the reasons why I wasn't really a fan of the black pro mist. I didn't like all the heavy halation that it does. However, what is cool, this is a great example showing you why the Aria Mist is better than a black pro mist, in my opinion, okay, is because you are lowering the contrast more with the Aria, right? Just watch the basket. There's a black pro mist. Watch the chip chart. Watch the basket on this black pro mist. And now I'm going to jump to the Aria 1/4. Look at that. It's just squeezing that waveform a little more. And that's generally what you're trying to do. Trying to really just squeeze that waveform in, control your tones a little more. Okay, now we're going to jump to Digital Diffusion. Okay, now Digital Diffusion. Oh, before we jump to Digital Diffusion, I want us to jump back a little bit to the Black Pro Mist, and I want us to watch the bokeh. Okay, because this is important, because when we get to some more wacky, different kind of diffusion filters, some of them really start affecting the bokeh. But here you'll see Black Pro Mist not doing too bad. Aria Mist, same, not bad at all. Yeah, notice here you can really see how bad the Black Pro Mist is halating. Look at that difference there. Wow. Okay, now let's jump to Digital Diffusion. Clean, right? No halation, nothing. I will tell you this, Digital Diffusion, made by Tiffin, it is probably the most subtle diffusion filter on the market, hands down. It does not squeeze your waveform. It does not lower your contrast. It does not lower your saturation. All it does is it slightly reduces the resolution. That's all Digital Diffusion is. And for that reason, in my opinion, I think a Digital Diffusion filter is something to lean on for product shots, where you don't want it to be super soft. You don't want to, product shots, so they want to stay true to the color saturation of that product. So that's something where Digital Diffusion is going to come in. It's going to only focus on lowering the resolution and the resolution only. It's going to slightly get away from a digital look, right? So a lot of times that's why I use Digital Diffusion Like for instance, in the beginning when I first got my Ivoscope, I was using Digital Diffusion directly on the Ivoscope to protect the front glass element of the Ivoscope, because the front glass element of that lens sits so close to the edge, and I just was looking for something to protect it, and also kind of slightly affect the image a little bit. So I was using a quarter Digital Diffusion, but then eventually I just went to a normal, really high-end B&W UV filter to protect the front of that lens. But I will point out that I noticed SIMMOD did recently put out their own UV filter, so that might be something interesting to look at. Digital Diffusion half, and now you're going to see a big difference. Aria half. I mean, look at the difference between those halves, right? This is why I say the Aria half is definitely, hands down, one of the strongest half-strength diffusion filters I've ever seen, right? I've never seen any diffusion filter that's such a strong effect at only the half. And we're going to notice it even when we look at much stronger diffusion filters, because Digital Diffusion, again, is definitely the most subtle diffusion filter on the market. Okay, so now we're going to jump to a bronze Glimmer glass 1/4. Okay, now the downside or the disservice that I'm doing to you all here is bronze Glimmer glass is a filter that I picked up for a short film that I was hired to be the DP on called Boundary. And this was specifically, I found the idea for using a bronze Glimmer glass on our black actors was because I was reading an article from the ASC about One Night in Miami, okay? And they were talking in there about how bronze Glimmer glass is a really good filter to use on dark skin tones, and it just does. I mean, Boundary is doing quite well. It's on the festival circuit right now. It's winning some awards, definitely in some festivals out there in New York where the director is from, director-writer. So that's what I did on Boundary, used a bronze Glimmer glass. This same filter, only a quarter strength. I would have liked to win a little heavier with the Milvuses, maybe like a bronze Glimmer glass half, but on such short notice, because I was picked up very last minute to shoot that short film, the quarter was all I could get. So, but let's look at bronze Glimmer glass quarter. Okay, here it is versus Aria quarter. Right, so they're pretty close, but again, as you notice, the Aria is squeezing the waveform even more, right? It's really lowering the contrast, lowering the saturation on our fruit bowl there on our chip chart. Quite interesting the way it squeezes that waveform. Let's look at the bokeh of the bronze Glimmer glass. Very clean, right? Notice all of this area in here on the fruit bowl too, as well as the candle bokeh. Okay, that's what we're looking at. Jumping to the Aria quarter. You'll notice the bronze Glimmer glass does have a little bit slight more halation though, doesn't it? You can notice it in the bokeh shot. Way more slight halation with the bronze Glimmer glass, and then even when we get in there, then we jump, yeah, there is more halation with the bronze Glimmer glass, that is for sure. Okay, now we're going to jump to a Hollywood Blackmagic 1/4 strength. Hollywood Blackmagic is hands down one of my favorite filters. And just so you guys know, it is a combo filter. It's made by Schneider. They basically, they had a classic soft and they combined it with a mist filter, and that's how you get a Hollywood Blackmagic. So now this is only the quarter strength. Notice how our bokeh is starting to get contaminated. See these little dimples? That's because both Hollywood Blackmagic and classic soft, they have little dimples on the glass, right? Little circle, they're called lenslets, okay? So you notice the bokeh is starting to get contaminated here on the Hollywood Blackmagic, even with a quarter. So if we compare that to the way the bokeh is on the Aria quarter, much cleaner bokeh, right? So that's what I'm talking about. But now we get in here, we see the shot. Okay, notice our saturation, notice our contrast, notice our slight halation around that candle. And now I'm going to jump to the Aria quarter. Yeah, look at that. Here, though, I will say I do think that the Aria is blooming that candle highlight a little more than our HBM, right? It's definitely squeezing the waveform way more, and it's definitely lowering the contrast and the saturation, right? The Aria filters are so interesting to me. I feel like it's a little bit of an ultracon, which we'll look at soon, and it's almost like a fog or smoke filter too, kind of the way that it has that slight veil across the frame, and also maybe a little bit of, it also reminds me of again, a soft net filter. Okay, so now we're gonna jump to the HBM half. Okay, now let's look at the bokeh with HBM half. Now you see there, dimples on our bokeh. We compare it to the bokeh of the Aria half. But now we'll look at the actual shot. HBM half versus Aria half. Oop, let me get where it's in focus. Way less contrast there. Look, that's why I was saying, Hollywood Blackmagic, it's a sandwich filter, meaning it's two filters in one. So realistically, I used to think, wow, Hollywood Blackmagic half is a pretty heavy filter, and then you look at it with an Aria half and you go, whoa, compared to an Aria half, HBM half is not nearly as heavy of a filter, right? And that's what I mean. Like, this Aria is really interesting the way how heavy it is at that half strength. That's not a bad thing, you know, it's just something to observe, right? But it's definitely squeezing our waveform way, way more than HBM. This is where I say, again, I think the Aria half would be a very specific filter for period pieces, you know, 70s period pieces, 80s period pieces, you know. It really, to me, you know, it has a really interesting, unique look, very stylistic, okay? Now we're going to jump to fog quarter. Now we can see where I was saying, you know, the Aria seems to be a little bit of like a fog or a smoke filter. So this is a quarter fog, and we're going to compare that to the Aria quarter. Now you'll see way more halation with the fog filter, right? Because again, it's meant to, now again, fog filters are meant to be used outdoors. Smoke filters are what you use indoors. I've done an entire video on smoke filters. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below if you are new here. And unfortunately, I did not compare Smoque to Aria because I don't have Smoque in these low densities. I don't even think they make a Smoque under a half, honestly, and I don't own a half. I use Smoque 2. I love Smoque 2 filter. Again, I'll leave a link to that video down in the description below. But fog filters are what you use outdoors generally to enhance a morning shot or something or like that. Or if you even want to take the fog even a step further in your exterior shot that you're doing, you would definitely want to lean on a fog filter. And you can see, you know, it's creating that kind of quote-unquote fog effect, whereas the Aria is not doing that nearly as bad at that same density. And I would say even the fog filter might be squeezing our waveform even more than the Aria in this instance. Okay, now let's jump to the Yukon half. Okay, this is the Ultracon filter. This is literally the filter. Ultracon is the filter that Tiffin was awarded the Emmy for, okay? Ultracons, now again, I'm doing you a slight disservice. Ultracon is meant to be used in day exteriors. But, you know, people do what they want to do. Plenty of guys, including on the Dog Times Patreon, they use Ultracons indoors all the time. However, for me, on a Netflix pilot that I was the DP on last summer, some friends of mine were the writers and stars of it, so they brought me on as the DP. I was using the Zeiss Milvus with the Komodo. I did all the interiors using low con, and then all the day exteriors using Ultracon, okay? And why Ultracon was designed to be used outdoors is because it works off of all the ambient light surrounding the camera, literally 360 degrees, okay? So that includes all the light, right? It's just the way they were designed. It's a beautiful filter to be used outdoors, and it really does squeeze your waveform. It's squeezing your waveform down, right? And that's why it's really nice to use for day exteriors, because it's going to protect your highlights while also, you know, lifting your blacks. But compare this now, because again, Ultracon is another one that's a really heavy filter, or at least I thought it was until I saw it Aria Mist. I mean, look at the difference between a half Aria Mist versus an Ultracon half. An Ultracon half is not a weak filter by any means. So that's what I mean. This Aria half is very, very heavy, very, very strong effect, right? Yeah, big differences there. Okay, next we're going to jump to the, okay, now you're going to get into some really wacky old school filters, classic softs. Okay, we're starting with the classic soft 1/8. Notice the halation, but also I want us to back up and look at the bokeh. Now, classic soft will destroy your bokeh, not only on your highlights, but look at our fruit bowl here. Look at all, I mean, it has so many lenslets and dimples, and that's one thing when they advanced or evolved the classic soft into the Hollywood Blackmagic, they controlled those lenslets a little better. Okay, so this is the classic soft 8th versus the Aria 8th. Again, the Aria is squeezing our waveform a little more. Okay, now if we jump and look at the classic soft 1/4, again, our halation's getting a little heavier, the bokeh's getting worse. However, I love classic soft filters. And then we jump to the Aria quarter. Again, the Aria is, you know, as soon as you jump to the quarter, it's starting to halate more. Yeah, no, more halation, and obviously it is squeezing our waveform even more. Now the last one, classic soft half. This is one of my favorite classic soft filters, but look how bad, I mean, look at your bokeh. It's just like, looks like waffles, right? And then now this is the half, but again, now keep in mind, classic soft half, this is a heavy filter, but not when compared to an Aria half, right? Big differences there. But I want us to notice the bokeh. The Arias are so much cleaner. But yeah, it's definitely squeezing that waveform. But again, you have that veil. You have kind of that soft net effect, right? So I did not compare the Aria to the softnet because my softnet is a 3, and that just would not be fair to compare that to a half. So that's what it is. However, Classic Soft I love. I use that on a short film that's also in the festival circuit right now. It's called The Chair. I do breakdowns of all these projects that I work on over on the Dog Times Patreon, by the way, if any of you are interested. But yeah, I tested for a long time, and then I just went with the Classic Soft half on that short film. So there you can see the differences there. Big differences with these Aria Mist filters compared to some other more standard common filters out there. Another thing to remember that our friends at SIMMOD offers is these cool little filter tray adapters where you can screw in either a 77mm screw-on filter or an 82mm. I actually use these quite often. They're pretty cool, and they do work with full-frame lenses on a Super 35 camera. So be sure you head on over to SIMMODLens.com to check out the current prices running on these filters. Obviously, you may not want the whole set, or you may want to opt for the more industry standard size. Now, there is a cool new product I also want to mention that SIMMOD is going to start rolling out. As you know, they have been the main go-to for customizing your vintage lenses, but now you have the option to even customize your camera with these new custom port caps. This is so rad. I didn't even know this was a thing. Ron just had this whipped up for me and sent it out. This is a custom EF port cap. As you can see here, I do have it attached to my Kipper tie mount for my red Komodo, and it is just as well built and sturdy as the Kipper tie. And there you go, custom laser engraved, really nice quality. I mean, it is really, really nice. Now, SIMMOD Lens calls this a 007 port cap, and why they call it that is because this has a little hidden feature. As you can see here, you can unscrew the top part and you can drop in there an Apple AirTag. I absolutely love this. This is a foolproof way to find out who stole your camera from the airport or from the back of your car. This is so cool. I absolutely love that. Yeah, these port caps are rad. Kind of cool, right? Yeah, so again, be sure to check on over at SIMMODLens.com. They got so much cool, fun stuff over there. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Guys, please hit the subscribe button, tap that notification bell, check it out, man. I am still a huge fan, owner, and user of the SIMMOD Variable ND and the awesome night filter that they make. I've always been a big fan of SIMMOD products. So yeah, I gotta give a shout out to Ron for, hitting me up about these cool new Aria Mist filters. They're pretty rad. Speaking of the SIMMOD Variable ND, I did a video not too long ago comparing that to the Leica EF to RF variable ND adapter, and then also threw in the Revar Cine with the Bright Tangerine 1 tray, the more industry standard variable ND for matte box. So be sure to go check that out. It got kind of slept on. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. I have way more views on this channel than I do subscribers, so help a brother out. Tap that subscribe button, tap that notification bell so you'll know instantly whenever a crazy new video of mine drops. I am a little off the cuff here, a little out of the box, and that's just because, well, that's what happens when you grow up in the entertainment industry. This is all I know. I've been working in the entertainment industry since 2002. So yeah, you never know what you're gonna get around here. I don't answer to anybody, and I march to the beat of my own drum. All right, so as always, thanks for watching. Thanks again to Ron and all the family over there at SIMMOD Lens, and yeah, we will see you in the next one. And also special thanks to our model Roz Stanley for helping us out with those filter tests. All right, that's gonna do it. That's a wrap. All right. I'm just gonna give a heads up. I am in super host mode today, so look out, YouTube world. We're not even gonna wear a hat today. We're gonna go full crazy out here. What happens is there's so much knowledge available online nowadays, and everyone's fighting to be at the top rung of the same ladder, is that everyone's website and reels end up looking identical. So how can you make yourself look different? Well, that's where things like filters come in handy, as well as honoring the piece that you're working on. Rather than thinking, oh, this is how my images look, I want it to look like this is how it's going to look on my Instagram feed. Forget about all of that. None of that matters. If you're thinking of that stuff, you're not a real filmmaker. You're not a true cinematographer that honors the image and the piece that you're actually working on.